Even though we pay full price for a game, we still need the good stuff. Hey, what's going on, geeks? Max the Beast is here, and welcome to another My Thoughts video. Today's topic is microtransactions. And why do I think they're pretty much an unnecessary thing at this point? And why does nobody like seeing them in games now? So, that's the topic for today. I'm using CSGO as the gameplay because I feel like it fits the whole microtransaction stereotype or topic quite well. With that being said, let's begin. So, in order for me to talk about microtransactions to you guys, people have to understand what a microtransaction is. A microtransaction is basically a purchase that you get within an application, regardless if it's a game or an app such as recording software. It could be pretty much any smaller purchase inside of an application, such as a pro version of Smuley or Smuley Piano, or the more extreme or the more popular in today's culture, purchases within games. That's why you see games these days on the iOS App Store and Android, Google Play, or whatever, on iOS devices that are plagued with microtransactions. And the PC is not safe from this either. In fact, I think PC may have it among the worst. The second worst. The worst would be the mobile devices, and the PC would have it second to worst. But to keep this simple, we're going to stick to PC gaming. My thoughts on microtransactions and PC gaming. As we talk about microtransactions as a whole, it would take well over 30-40 minutes to explain everything, as this is a massive topic. With that being said, what are my thoughts? Or let's just continue to talk about what microtransactions are. On PC, there are games, especially under the free-to-play category, that have a lot of microtransactions in them. And these have gotten these smaller free-to-plays quite bad ratings, especially if the transactions are, that's how you phrase it, pay to win. What this means is that you have to pay actual real-life money to acquire an item in the game that will put you above everybody else. And this is very popular, as I said, with some of these free-to-play shooters, free-to-play games here on Steam. And they get negative reviews and negative ratings, not just because of gameplay issues, but because in order to do well, you have to spend actual money on getting a good item in order to actually get a kill or whatever, be able to progress in the game. And some games like Anno Online, strategy games and simulation games, city builders, suffer from this as well, with things such as when you, let's say, are trying to build something, and it takes actual real-life time to complete said build. You have the option to spend money to complete the building process, right? Well, some of these games have building times that are insanely long, like 2 hours real time. But you might be wondering, like at the start, it'll be like maybe a minute. Be like, okay, I can wait a minute. I don't think I need to spend any money to hurry up a minute building process. But then, as the game progresses, the building times take longer. Some even reaching up to like 2 hours real time, being like, why do I have to wait this long? And this is where my paying to speed up the clock seems very appetizing, very appealing, and that's what these developers are hoping for, is that players would be like, oh, I can speed this up. Good stuff. Let me just buy this right now. Because players are like, I'm not going to wait 2 hours to build something in-game. I could just pay $5 to buy a bucket of crystals that allow me to speed up time. And that's how these free-to-play developers make their money. And while it's not the best thing, it's kind of sort of understandable, as these are free-to-plays and developers have to make their money somehow. However, in full-price games such as CSGO, Rainbow Six Siege, and other things, microtransactions exist. Keep in mind, games like Rainbow Six Siege cost about $60, and CSGO costs about $15. These are kind of pricey games. And then you have an option to pay for stuff. And while things in CSGO are purely cosmetic, as well mostly as Rainbow Six Siege, you still have to pay money for them. And money is money. You kind of need it. And to be showing it out on cosmetic stuff at the start, okay, the Steam community market can sell you stuff very cheap. Like, we're talking 10 cents for a decent skin. Like, nothing obscene, nothing incredibly strange or anything. However, games like CSGO and TF2, they have a crate system, where, well, by playing the game, you can get a crate dropped. Within the crate are different skins for your weapons of different tiers. And when you purchase a key for a crate, which keys for TF2 and CSGO are each $2.50, that can add up over time depending on how many crates you have, and if you want to shell out the money to get these cosmetics. Yes, they're cosmetics, you don't need them to play the game. However, people like looking at skins on their weapons. Having a unique decal will make people, may incite a sense of curiosity with players being like, oh, or excitement being like, oh, this weapon looks pretty, because I got a good skin because I paid for it. Now, games like CSGO can drop skins. However, these skins are typically of the lower quality, and don't look as fancy as the ones you have to pay for. And yes, you could say there is trading. However, there are trade scammers, so most people who are not into the whole trading thing like myself tend to stay with the whole let's pay money thing. And while this may be not such a good idea, as, like I said, you have to pay money, and these items are purely cosmetic, they're not actually helping you, it's just feeding the developers more money. And I mean, and just buying a couple crates and buying a couple keys is not a bad thing. It's just the way these things work. In CSGO, when you unbox a crate, it goes through a little sequence where it scrolls over multiple different skins and items and such before landing on the final one. It's kind of like gambling in a way, as you never know what you're going to get, but you get to see your options, and then it'll roll and keep sliding over your options until finally it lands on one. And whatever tier, whatever skin you got, you get. And then it's even more of a gamble to see what quality of skin you have. You have battle scarred, well worn, field tested, minimal wear, and factory new, which is the best. And even if you get a good skin, there's no guarantee that it's actually going to be of good quality. Which is where, if you get let's say a bad skin, or a skin that is low quality, it may get you interested in purchasing another crate and key so you can try again, leading to intense gambling sessions and you with an empty wallet. this is where it gets this is where it gets bad. Like I said, buying a crate every once in a while isn't a bad thing. And I mean, crates themselves are typically around 10 cents, so it's not like the crates are super expensive, and you can also earn crates by just playing the game. But it's when you have a lot of, but it's when you go crazy on your spending, and you buy a bunch of keys along with the crates, that's when it gets crazy. And that's when it gets not on the good side. I mean, you spend your money the way you want to. I just recommend you guys against going on these insane spending sprees. Unless you have, of course, the funds to back it up. And, yes, while CSGO and TF2, they're purely cosmetic. There are games that are full price that have the pay-to-win aspect. A good example of this is Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and Black Ops 3, and Modern Warfare Remastered. You see, they have a supply drop system, which functions kind of sort of similarly to CSGO's crate system, as you have a chance of getting cosmetic items, and it scrolls through a little bit of list of different qualities. You can get like epics, you can get the best of the best, some really cool stuff. Then you get your common everyday stuff that no one cares about. And then you can get your really rare stuff, and the really cool stuff that everyone's talking about. And supply drops, you can get them either by using Call of Duty points or COD points, or by spending actual money. Because COD points, you earn only a small amount by actually playing the game. You get more by paying various amounts of money. And that can be pretty costly sometimes. Especially if you want, like, let's say 5,000 COD points for $5. And then you spend more money and more money to get more COD points. Because playing the game will get you barely any. Yes. And then Call of Duty games are typically around $60. That's not cheap. And to have, yes, most of these items are purely cosmetic, such as like character emotes, stuff like that. But having them in the game has received some controversy, especially when recently they have added new weapons to the game. But in order to get the new weapons, it's not like in TF2 where you complete contracts to unlock the new weapons, but you have to buy supply drops. And this has raised some controversy in the Call of Duty community, as people don't want to have to get their new weapons out of supply drops, out of crates. And they make the weapons as rare as possible to make the chance of getting a new weapon in a supply drop insanely low. So you have to open a bunch if you want to have a glimmer of hope of getting a new weapon. Which makes people unhappy and angry in some cases, because if they can't get a new weapon because their chance of getting it in a supply drop is like 1 out of a million, it's not good. People are not going to be able to get their weapons unless they spend a crap ton of money on COD points to get supply drops. And like I said, it's however you want to spend your money. I'm just advising you against spending a bunch of it on things like supply drops. Even more so, and just try to call out these developers, just call out these problems with these games. Then we get smaller games that are not free, that are not $60, but still suffer from the microtransaction syndrome. I mentioned earlier that a lot of free-to-plays suffer from microtransactions. And I said earlier how some of it may be considered an okay thing and not totally scummy, because developers can need money if they're selling game, or if they're giving out games for free. But there are games that have the pay to win to the extreme, and have transactions to the extreme, which falls under the category as what I just said, pay to win. And I mentioned this earlier. Games like Blockade 3D and Red Crucible Firestorm are two of the shining examples of pay to win in games, which is upsetting, especially when these games attract players. Like Blockade 3D attracted players who were fans of Minecraft and Unturned. They're blocky shooter. It's a blocky shooter, and it had a decent player base for a while. And then the transactions hit to the extreme, to the point where they added new weapons that were insanely powerful, but you had to pay a good chunk of money for them. And at the start, $1 doesn't seem too bad, but as you continue to purchase stuff, these $1 transactions add up. And that's where the problems begin for people, as sometimes they just can't watch their spending, and then they pay too much. Then they end up paying too much money, and that's a bad thing for people's finances. I'm not saying that you remove microtransactions entirely, just saying do it differently. And games like Overwatch handle their loot box system pretty much bearably. It's not insane. They're not super greedy. It doesn't seem super greedy. And they're not locking anything from players that'll give another player an advantage, as all of the items in Overwatch that you get from your loot boxes are entirely cosmetic. And on top of that, you can get loot boxes by leveling up, or whenever a new event is released that has event-themed loot boxes. If you launch the game, you get a free one when the event starts. Then as you level up your character, as you level up your profile, every time you reach a new level, it'll give you a new loot box. And to make it better, the loot boxes don't require keys, so you don't have to pay money to open the box. You just, if you want to, you can purchase a box. But you can get loot boxes just by playing the game. Now, some of you might be wondering, well, what are your thoughts on this? And I'll get to that in a second. But the final thing I'd like to mention before we do is iOS to PC ports. A decent example of this is the game Martial Arts whatever. I forget the name of it. But the game that the gameplay is being shown here. Whenever you enter a combat sequence and complete it, you have the option to retry it by using something called an eagle. If you feel like you messed up, you have the chance to retry it by spending an eagle. Same goes for defending. You start out with 20 eagles, but as you continue to mess up, first it costs 1 eagle, then the eagle amount increases repeatedly. And it gets higher and higher until eventually you're out of eagles, and you have to pay for more. And it's an iOS to PC port. And normally these are pretty scummy and pretty bad, but this one's surprisingly actually pretty good, and the eagles aren't rubbed in your face. However, I'm just using this as an example of a iOS to PC port. Now, this might be a shining example of a good iOS to PC port. There are bad ones. There are just plain obvious games that are just obviously iOS to PC ports, that the transactions are terrible. The game I said earlier, Anno Online, that is an iOS to PC port, meaning you have, and some of these games have these constant transactions to get things like jewels and things to speed up time. and those cost money. And that can be on the annoying side. And games can be broken because of this. Microtransactions can make the game virtually unplayable because in some cases, in order to get anything done, you have to pay money to speed things up, which makes games not fun and not playable. It doesn't matter if the gameplay is good, if you can't play it because the game is constantly shoving microtransactions down your throat. This is not good. And this is why most iOS to PC ports are frowned upon and are shamed by the PC community. The game I'm showing you right here is the only exception. Is one of the few exceptions. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. My thoughts on microtransactions. Microtransactions, when used correctly, such as in Blizzard's case, can be good. They can be okay and bearable, as long as they are purely cosmetic and are not making you shell out too much money, and keeping it optional to the point where, oh, you don't want to spend money? Okay, you could just earn your loot box or whatever by playing the game. And that's the way it should be. You get awarded for doing well in a game. But sadly, that's not the way most of these games work. So, like I said, if used correctly, microtransactions can be okay. And in some cases, can be good, and could be a good way to show your support to developers you like. But again, they should be and should remain optional. And then there's games, and if a developer promises that there will not be microtransactions, they should stick to that promise. Payday 2's devs learned that the hard way. By a couple years ago, they said Payday 2 will not feature any microtransactions. And then last year, they added microtransactions, causing their game to be review bombed, which is another topic I talked about in the past. So, yes, microtransactions can be scummy in some cases, but if they're used correctly, I see no problems with them. You may be wondering, Max, how do you use a microtransaction well and handle it wisely without getting too money grabby, too greedy for money? Well, like I said a few minutes ago, you keep them optional. And you keep them so you can still get the exact same things as you would get by paying money by playing the game. Whether that means, like in CSGO's case, whenever if you finish a game and do own a game, you have the chance of getting a drop. Or in games like Overwatch, where you complete a game and level your character, you level your profile up, you get a box. And that you don't cram keys down your throat. And if they do, keep the prices of a key tame. So that if you buy a bunch, yeah, the developers will still get a good size, reasonable portion of money, but not insanity. If that makes sense. And if it's a free-to-play, like I said, make them optional, and do not make them necessary to progress in the game, as in Anno Online's case. Or in cases like Red Crucible Firestorm, do not lock weapons or items that will make the game make a player overpowered because they got an item out of a crate. Do not make it so you have to pay in order to get good weapons or good gear. Or in cases like Call of Duty, and do not make the transactions necessary to get your new weapons. Make it so they're either earnable, you can use COD points to buy the weapons individually, or if you want to make a microtransaction, make it so you can buy the weapon outright for a reasonable price. Anyway, with that being said, I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like. And be sure to comment down below your thoughts on the whole microtransaction thing. Anyway, with that being said, if you are new, consider subscribing for future content. Means a lot, guys. Thanks for 31 subscribers. Anyway, guys, as always, Max the Beast is out.